Hi, my name is Luis, and today I'll be talking about citizenship path. Do you know that besides born in the country, you're able to get citizenship? For example, a person who lives in Brazil and is working in Brazil, he has a way to get a opportunity and have a pathway to citizenship. A person who is living in Africa and married to a U.S. citizen, it's able to have American citizenship. Also, a person who is born outside of the country in a U.S. military base has that opportunity. Also, myself, a person like me, I was born in Hermosillo, Mexico, by my mother. She is a U.S. citizen. So the question is, what are the advantages to be a U.S. citizen, and what are the disadvantages to be a U.S. citizen? Now, I'm going to be talking about these advantages and disadvantages, and I want to share all this information. First of all, the first things first. Do you know that even Native Americans during history, the course of history, they didn't have access to citizenship? Or African American communities they didn't have access to citizenship? As Asian, they, they didn't have this access. So, for example, in 1848, the Chinese came to California and started build railroads. In Africa, they bring slaves to the South States, but they didn't have access to citizenship. During the time, for example, by the time of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which really put restrictions on Asian communities, especially China, they didn't have access to citizenship. However, this person challenged the system. In 1894, he challenged the system. His name is Wong Kim Ark. He is a Chinese descendant who was born in San Francisco and he travels a lot to China. So when he came back from China to San Francisco, the customs didn't recognize his nationality based on physical traits, based on his color skin. They didn't recognize that. So he went to the Supreme Court, put a complaint, and win the case. So when the interpretation of the 14th Amendment applied, there was a test because no matter what is the color of skin or the physical traits, as long as you were born in U.S. soil, you are a U.S. citizen, pretty much. Now, in 1924 was the most restrictive. The 1924 Act restrict most of the continents except for Western Europe countries. So the people that came from Western Europe, they were able to come. Even Eastern Europe, they were restricted. Now, with the Act of 1965, it opened more, it gives more opportunities. So people from different continents, countries, in different color skins, they can come into America. They have more opportunities. Now, what are the advantages to be a U.S. citizen? First of all, you can be elected to one of the political positions. You're able to have that, like a mayor, for example. You're able to work, you're able to avoid deportation, you're able to bring family relatives to America. So, what are the disadvantages to be a U.S. citizen? Well, the disadvantages is that no matter which country you live and work, you still pay taxes. On the other hand, eh, you're never going to be considered exactly like an American based on the stereotypes and racial profiles. On the other hand, if you live alone, you miss your family, and based on the culture, it's not that easy to assimilate culture. Still, based on this fact, and on top, that our President Donald Trump wants to end birthright citizenship, even for Native Americans or African American communities, or even Latino. The fact is that I chose to be I chose to be a U.S. citizen. The reasons, as I mentioned, I am free. That's number one. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. The other aspect is prosperity, economical prosperity, which I can put my own company, and I can have job. I can avoid deportation. I can bring my families. There's many factors, and the weather. If I don't like being the winter in Wisconsin, I go to California. If I don't like the foggy of San Francisco, I go to San Diego, or I can go to desert. I can go to Vegas. So there's plenty of advantages, not only political rights or financial rights, but also weather. For example, not even Canadians have that privilege. All the time it's winter there. So are the reasons that I choose to be a U.S. citizen. Thank you.